for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible.
All right, two things are going to pop off today.
Justice for all.
They're going to vote to see if they can override Trump's veto of the defense spending bill. And we are looking to see, will Bernie Sanders filibuster and push for the fact of 2K checks for the American people.
The majority leader.
I move to proceed to calendar number 480S3985.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar 480S3985, a bill to improve and reform policing practices, accountability, and transparency.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
First, I want to wish all my fellow senators and our staff colleagues here in the Capitol a happy and healthy New Year. In particular, I'd like to extend our gratitude to the Capitol Police, the officers of the Secretary of the Senate, and the Sergeant at Arms, and the many other staff who have gone above and beyond to help us attend to important business this holiday season. Today, by the grace of God, the genius of science, and the resilience of the American people, we appear to have a bright 2021 on the horizon. Our great nation is poised to defeat this pandemic in the months ahead through safe and effective vaccines. The pace of the American people's economic recovery has already beaten expectations and predictions.
The stock market is
thanks to the ingenuity of our citizens and historic relief policies from Congress, overall personal income in our country is already higher now than they were prior to the pandemic. Now the country needs more support, and the significant remaining pain is not, I repeat, not evenly distributed. Far from it. So we just enacted another historic $900 billion rescue package to get vaccines distributed, to keep small businesses alive, and to get a whole lot more targeted support to struggling people who actually need it. From multiple kinds of extra federal unemployment benefits to nutrition assistance, rental assistance, direct cash, and beyond. This latest huge historic package was just signed into law less than 1 week ago. It is beginning to take effect right now. Many households have already received the latest round of direct cash or will receive it very soon. To help them turn the page into this brand new year. And while this huge new aid package takes effect, a bipartisan common sense caucus in both chambers is not keen to let Speaker Pelosi and Senator Sanders rush to borrow another $500 billion for universal cash giveaways, regardless of need. A huge chunk would essentially be socialism for rich people, money flowing to households earning well into six figures, who did not lose any jobs or income last year. The House Democrats' bill is just simply not the right approach. That's what editorial pages across the political spectrum say. That's what even liberal economists say, and that's what common sense tells us. Here's what the Senate is focused on: completing the annual defense legislation that looks after our brave men and women who volunteer to wear the uniform. We've passed this legislation 59 years in a row, and one way or another, we're going to complete the 60th annual NDAA and pass it into law before this Congress concludes on Sunday. It's a serious responsibility, but it's also a tremendous opportunity to direct our national security priorities to reflect the resolve of the American people and the evolving threats to their safety at home and abroad. It's our chance to recommit to research and development so that our 21st century military is equipped to outmatch any adversary. It's our chance to ensure we keep pace with competitors like Russia and China. It's our chance to remind brave service members and their families that we have their backs with facilities, resources, and support benefiting the finest fighting forces in the world. Over the past year, our colleagues on the Armed Services Committee have made sure that the legislation delivers for our troops and for our nation. Now it's time for us to deliver this bill.
This bill will go a lot faster if you could get everybody to agree And to do so, stimulus payment. Just saying. Alright, so Mitch McConnell's made his remarks. It is what it is. Now we're waiting for any rebuttals, any challenges to the bill. Like, there's not going to be any challenges to the bill proper because it's to fund the military, and we as Americans love the military-industrial complex. Yep, he showed it. But the main thing is we're going to see if the Democrats can push any leverage to get these payments out, because this Congress, the assembly of the men and women,
President.
Democratic leader?
Thank you, Mr. President.
third.
Well, I can't remember the last time the Senate convened on New Year's Day, so I want to take this opportunity to wish all of my colleagues a Happy New Year. I want to thank the staff for having to come in and work on New Year's Day, and I want to bid a good riddance to 2020. There can be no question that last year was a horrible year, as they have said in Britain, an annus horribilis. But we must begin the first year of this new decade preparing to inaugurate a new president and inoculate the country against this virus. The American people have reason to hope. The Senate can start off this new year by adding to that sense of hope by sending $2,000 checks to struggling American families. The Senate can start off 2021 by really helping the American people. We can start off 2021 by sending $2,000 checks to struggling American families to carry them through the darkest and final days of this pandemic. The votes today on this uncommon New Year's Day session could be the last of the 116th Congress. That means that today is the last chance to take up and pass the House bill to provide $2,000 checks to the American people. If the Senate does not take action today, 2,000 checks will not become law before the end of Congress, and they will know that Leader McConnell and the Republican majority have prevented them from getting the checks, plain and simple.
Agreed.
This is the last chance for a mother in Nashville, $4,000 behind on the rent, whose water was shut off earlier this month. This is the last chance for the medical receptionist in Macomb, $2,100 behind on the rent, whose electricity was shut off in September on her son's third day of virtual kindergarten. Kid can't go to school. This is the last chance for 12 million Americans who have fallen nearly $6,000 behind on rent and utility, or the 26 million Americans who've had trouble putting food on the table. The last chance.
Right.
Make no mistake
Yes,
about it.
articles.
$600 has never been
People
enough
skip
for
groceries
them.
just to feed their families at this point.
This is the last chance to deliver $2,000 before a new Congress is sworn in, and the legislative process must start all over again. For once, we have progressive Democrats, conservative Republicans, the president himself, and not to mention, of course, the majority, the vast majority of the American people singing from the same songbook in support of these checks. We have a bill that's already passed the House. All we are asking for is a simple vote in the Senate. I, for one, am confident it would pass if given the chance, and that may be the real reason that Leader McConnell and the Republicans don't want to bring it up.
And
We have had many opportunities this week to vote on the measure. Senator McConnell has blocked every one of them. We have offered to vote on whatever unrelated issues the Republican leader says he wants to vote on, so long as we can get a clean vote on the House bill to provide $2,000 checks. The only way to actually make it happen in this session of Congress. That offer still stands. But give us a vote on the House bill. It's okay if the Republican leader opposes checks. It's okay if the majority of Republican senators oppose the checks. They can make their case to the American people and oppose the bill. but let us vote. It's okay if the Republican leader wants to call direct assistance to American people poorly targeted and socialism for the rich, even after he drove the passage of a $2 trillion across-the-board reduction in corporate taxes. But give us a vote. Make the argument. Let the Senate work its will.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like the Republican leader is afraid to schedule a vote on $2,000 checks because he's afraid it'll pass.
Oh, he knows
What a
it.
terrifying thought that struggling Americans would get some money to feed their families, pay the rent, and get on with their lives. Pay the utility bill of that kindergarten kid or third grade kid who can't even go to school because his family can't afford electricity. We have a chance at the end of this painful year and at the beginning of a new one to give Americans reason for hope in 2021. The only thing standing in the way right now is Leader McConnell and the Republican Senate majority.
Yeah.
In a moment,
McConnell,
I'll ask consent for the final time that the Senate set a time for a vote on the House bill to provide 2,000 checks. I've done it every day this week. This is it, the last chance for the 116th Congress to pass $2,000 checks and to say to regular Americans, help is on the way. Let's have a vote. Let's have a vote. Pass this bill. There is no better way to usher in the new year. And so, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of Calendar 645 H.R. 9051, a bill to increase recovery rebate amounts to $2,000 for individuals, that the bill be read a third time and the Senate vote on passage, and that if passed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President.
The Assistant Majority Leader.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, and let me just say, through the chair, thank you to the Senator from New York and the Senator from Vermont and Senator from Illinois and others here for the opportunity to spend New Year's with them. I know that's always been something that's been on my bucket list. Maybe not on top of the bucket list, but nevertheless, thank you for that opportunity. It does feel like a long time ago, but it was actually only, if you can believe this, the beginning of last week when both sides of the aisle and both sides of the Capitol came together to pass a targeted, responsible, and necessary relief package, which became law with overwhelming bipartisan support. It passed here in the Senate 92-6. Members on both sides of the aisle, myself included, have demonstrated that we are willing to dedicate resources to those struggling during this pandemic. The problem with what is being put forward, the House-passed Cash Act, is that it is not targeted to help those who are most in need. Now, just as a sort of point that out, it's not just us saying that, Mr. President. Even the Washington Post editorial board, called it one last bad idea for 2020. They singled it out as especially wrong-headed, the efforts of the progressive left to depict this, and I quote, as aid to desperate Americans despite the huge amounts of their term, this is the Washington Post term, their term, destined for perfectly comfortable families, end quote. As others here on the floor have noted, the bill would provide a payment to a family of 5 making up to $350,000. A family of 5 making $250,000 would receive a $5,000 benefit. Now, just to put that in perspective, Mr. President, that's more than was paid to a middle-class family of 5 under the CARES Act that we passed back in March. In addition, the bill would add an additional $463 billion, nearly $500 billion to the annual debt.
Okay.
And again, it's all money we have to borrow. All of this is money we have to borrow.
Borrow.
And that's just more than the first 2 economic impact payments combined. So put that in perspective, Mr. President. If you think of other ways that you could use that amount of money, the truth is that those types of sums could potentially be spent in many more targeted ways. But our colleagues on the Democrat side don't even want to debate some of those alternatives. Allowing small businesses a second draw of the Paycheck Protection Program would have cost approximately $285 billion. For the cost of the Cash Act, we could do another round of assistance to help small businesses keep their employees on the payroll and still have almost $200 billion left over. The expanded unemployment benefit signed into law last week cost approximately $120 billion for 11 additional weeks. That means that we could provide more than additional 40 weeks, 10 months of enhanced unemployment insurance benefits for those who have lost their jobs for the same cost as this proposal. Mr. President, this is simply not targeted relief for the people who need it the most. And those who say that we should just vote on this flawed House bill conveniently leave out the fact that they do not want us to amend it to make it better, to deliver more assistance to the people who are hurting the most. So, Mr. President, for all those reasons, and again, maybe just point out one last time that has been less than a week really now since the Senate voted and the President signed into law a proposal negotiated literally over months. Every fine point of that proposal negotiated, signed into law to provide targeted, fiscally responsible assistance to the people in this country who need it the most. This proposal is a shotgun approach where a rifle makes a lot more sense. If you really want to help people who need this the most, at a time when we are running a $26 trillion debt, borrowing every penny that we're making available to do this, we ought to sit down and figure out how to do it in the most efficient, effective, targeted way possible. This absolutely does not do that. When you have a family that is making $350,000 a year in this country, getting up to thousands of dollars of payments, and $250,000 a year in this country getting under this proposal a $5,000 check, I would argue, Mr. President, that is not targeted, that is not fiscally responsible, that is not efficient, that is not an effective way to spend the American taxpayers' dollars. Let's help the people who need it the most. We just passed a proposal, signed into law that does that. I think many of us on this side of the aisle are willing to look at other ideas and things that we can do that would help those people more, but this certainly is not it, so I object.
Mr. President,
Objection is noted.
just very briefly.
The the Democratic leader.
Someday soon.
Nice. George,
Mr. President, the only thing I would say through the chair to my friend from South Dakota is many of the proposals he proposed as alternatives to our proposal, the Republican majority objected to when we had our negotiations on the CARES bill. We believe this can be in addition to the expansion of unemployment insurance and other things. Given the state of the economy, that is what's needed. And I thank you for that and yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Vermont.
Thank you. And let me say to my friend, Senator Thune, it's certainly, I concur with you, what a pleasure it is to be spending New Year's Day with you and our colleagues, exactly what I know and every other member here wanted to do. But here we are because we have to be here.
It's your job.
And we are here because back home in my state and all over this country, millions and millions of families are struggling to put food on the table. They are struggling to pay their rent. They are struggling to come up with the money they need to go to the doctor. And this hits me in a sense, in a personal way. I just received the other day from a colleague of mine in Burlington, Vermont, where I live. Burlington, Vermont, largest city in the state of Vermont, all of 40,000 people.
Okay.
And what a volunteer wrote to me, they said, this is the quote, reporting on a food drive in Burlington, Vermont, where I live. Quote, over 30 volunteers showed up to the Champlain School to help bag groceries and to hand them out to those who came out. Unfortunately, there was not nearly enough donated food to provide a bag to everyone who showed up, despite us planning on an increased need. The line of cars filled the parking lot, wrapped around the school, and went out onto the main road for half a mile. This represented a major uptick from the October event that we were involved in.
Like, we have an 8.
This is Burlington, Vermont. Hundreds of cars lining up
And people
for emergency food, and the volunteers did not have enough food to distribute. They had to say to families who were trying to feed their kids, sorry, we do not have enough food. So what we are doing today is very simple. And that is Senator Thune and Senator McConnell and others have raised objection to the House-passed bill. And in the United States Senate, when we have differences of opinion, what we should be doing is debating that bill.
Yep.
So all that Senator Schumer is asking, all that I am asking is a simple request. Bring the bill to the floor. Not even asking you to vote for it. Bring the bill to the floor. And on top of everything else, we need 60 votes to pass. 60 votes. Can we get 60 votes? I don't know. I think virtually all of the 48 Democrats will vote for it. It means, Senator Thune, that we need 12 Republicans. I gather we got one right here who indicated he would vote for it. 5 or 6 others have been public about saying they will vote for it. Will we get the rest? I don't know. You don't know. But what is the problem with giving members of the United States Senate the opportunity to vote on the legislation? And when we have that debate, you can come up and you can raise all of your objections and we can debate it. Now, I hear Senator Thune and Senator McConnell before him talk about this bill being socialism for the rich, which I've got to tell you I find, Mr. President, somewhat hysterical. Because that's an issue I have been talking about for many, many years. And I am very delighted that my conservative Republican friends now recognize that we do have socialism for the rich. To paraphrase Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said that we live in a society where we have socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor. King was right.
Yep.
But despite what my Republican colleagues are saying, truth is that according to the Tax Policy Center, the top 5% of Americans, the wealthiest people in our country, would receive less than 1% of the benefits of these direct payments.
Yep.
Less than 1%. Doesn't sound to me like too much socialism for the rich. But while we are on the subject of socialism for the rich, which my Republican friends have suddenly become very concerned about, let me talk about the Trump tax proposal that was pushed very hard by Senator McConnell and the Republican leadership, and where I think every Republican voted for it. You want to talk about socialism for the rich? It is not the bill that puts $2,000 into working class hands all over this country. That ain't socialism for the rich. This is socialism for the rich in that bill. Amazon. Oh, by the way, I must say this if I may. We were quoting the liberal Washington Post owned by Jeff Bezos, the wealthiest guy in the world. So here is Jeff Bezos' company, Amazon, and they received a tax rebate. They paid nothing in 2018 in federal taxes. That's a corrupt tax system to begin with. But then on top of that, they received $129 million as a tax rebate. That, Senator Thune, is what socialism for the rich.
He says tax rebate, he means tax
In fact,
refund.
this particular company is owned by the richest guy in the world. You gave him a $129 million rebate. But it's not just Amazon. Delta Airlines also paid nothing in federal taxes in 2018, and yet they received $187 million rebate
Refund.
from that particular bill.
Oh, more receipts.
Chevron, helping to destroy our planet with their carbon emissions, $181 million in a rebate. That, my friends, is what socialism for the rich is about.
Yeah, you're right.
Socialism for the rich is not, in the midst of this terrible pandemic, putting a $2,000 check into the hands of working families. President, truth of the matter is that as a result of this pandemic, we are living through the worst and most difficult economic period since the Great Depression. Tens of millions of families are facing eviction. All over this country, in the wealthiest nation on earth, moms are struggling to feed their kids, keep the electricity on, and be able to go to the doctor.
Yep.
Now, I hear from my Republican friends that the economy is doing better, but I would like to just read to them a few of the stories that I have received in my office. We ask people, simple question, how are you doing out there? What's going on in your lives?
Shitty.
And we receive many, many thousands of responses from people in every state in this country. Just a few, just to bring some dose of reality here to the United States Senate, which often, in the midst of all of the campaign contributions coming in here from the rich, does not know what's going on in the real world. Here's the real world. Gentleman in Texas wrote, $2,000 is the difference between keeping our apartment and being evicted. Mother in Virginia wrote, $2,000 means I can afford to feed my 3 kids.
Yep.
Now, maybe we should give her a long lecture on macroeconomics and how well the stock market is doing. All she's worried about is feeding her 3 children. Woman in Wisconsin wrote, $2,000 would mean not having to choose between rent and groceries and not having to ration my partner's meds. Woman in Nevada wrote, it means paying my rent and getting life-saving treatment because I can't afford the $50 copay through my work insurance just to see my neurologist right now. Father in Florida wrote, quote, it would mean I could pay my bills. My electricity and phone are about to get shut off. I didn't have money for my son on Christmas, and I won't have money for his birthday on January 2nd. Father in New Jersey wrote, it would mean I could pay off credit card debt accumulated during this pandemic, feed my children, and pay my bills. Parent in Massachusetts wrote, it would mean that I could pay my rent and electricity and put food on the table. Woman in Missouri wrote, it would mean getting out of crushing debt. It would mean survival without daily fear. Someone in Texas wrote, it would mean I could actually put food in the fridge. Man in Maryland wrote, quote, it would mean I don't have to beg or go without food, shelter, and medicine. It would mean my family stays warm another couple of months and my dad gets proper treatment.
Senator, yield for a question.
I would.
I'd like to ask a question of the senator from Vermont through the chair. I have listened to the Republican analysis of the bill which you and Senator Schumer and I are asking for a vote on. A bill which passed the House and would give $2,000 basically in allotments or payments to families across America with certain income restrictions. And I've heard from the other side of the aisle repeatedly that this is socialism for the rich, that this is fundamentally unfair, and that we should do things in a targeted way. That's the argument that's made over and over again. And reference has been made repeatedly to the COVID-19 bill that passed last week with 92 votes, including many of the Republicans, virtually all of them, not all of them, but virtually all of them. And so that bill, if I remember correctly, had a $600 payment included in the bill. And I asked my staff, would you please analyze the formula for distributing the $600 and compare it to the formula for the $2,000, which is part of our bill. And lo and behold, they discovered it's the same formula. So if there is some fundamental moral injustice in the distribution of these funds, then I'm afraid all but 6 of the Republicans are guilty of the same immorality, because they all voted for that formula last week when it was $600, and now are scandalized by the notion that the same formula they voted for would be used for a $2,000 payment. I'm sure I've missed something in the translation here. I'd like to ask the senator from Vermont to explain this full outrage from the Republican side of the aisle.
Well, I think my
receipts.
friend from Illinois missed nothing in the translation. He's exactly right. But I also...
Senator from Illinois makes a good point. Senator, yield for a question.
Yeah.
So if the same formula is used and you're increasing the amount by $1,400 per person, so you're going from basically for a family of 4, what would be $2,400 payment to $8,000 payment, and you phase that down using the same formula, does the senator from Illinois understand the math and why that skews toward people who make a lot more money than they would under the other formula?
If the question's directed toward me, I'll answer it.
Well, I just think that you're making a point and a statement which is not accurate, because you're saying the formula is the same. The formula is the same, but the inputs change. And so the way it ramps down means that somebody who makes $350,000 gets a payment under the Sanders-Hawley proposal that they wouldn't know, and it phases out a lot sooner, as you know. So let's be clear about how that formula works, because you are misrepresenting the way that formula works.
And I asked my friend from...
Senator from Vermont has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would ask my friend from South Dakota, do you disagree with the Tax Policy Center, which says that the top 5% of Americans, the wealthiest people in our country, would receive less than 1% of the total benefits being dispersed?
I have not seen the Tax Policy Center, but I know math, and I know as a basic principle that when you stick bigger numbers in there, and you're using the same formula to phase something out, you're going to make it available to people who make a lot more money. That is a mathematical fact. And what you are saying when you talk about the same formula, it skews entirely different in the income scale. You know that. And all I'm saying is don't misrepresent the facts.
What I am saying is that according to a very reputable tax center organization, people who do this for a living, less than 1% of the benefits of the entire program go to the wealthiest people in this country. So when you're talking about trying to say, oh my God, all of this money is going to the rich, that ain't really true. But I would also ask my friend, where did you suddenly become a religious adherent about concern of socialism for the rich when you gave 83% of the benefits to the rich and large corporations in the tax bill that you supported? Where was your concern about socialism for the rich when Amazon, owned by the richest guy in the world, got a $129 million tax rebate?
Refund.
I didn't hear much about socialism for the rich during that debate. Yeah.
Well, very simply, what you are suggesting, so what you're saying here is the owner of the Washington Post, who said this is really bad policy and shouldn't be done in this way at the end of this year, is that what you're saying, that because he is a wealthy person, that somehow that's why he's making that statement? I think the Washington Post editorial board, in most cases, would be very sympathetic to the senator from Vermont's argument, because they take a liberal point of view on almost every issue. My point, very simply, is that we have limited amount of resources. This is borrowed money, as the senator from Vermont knows. And when we spent months, literally months, and you asked, why can't you guys just come down here? Why can't you just come down here and debate this? We tried 4 months to get the Democrats down here to debate a bill. We've put a bill on the floor in September. We put a bill on the floor in October, a coronavirus relief bill. And you guys blocked it. You didn't even want to talk about it. You didn't want to have an opportunity to amend it. We've been working at this 4 months, and we finally arrived after months at a proposal that helps people who need it the most, including nutrition assistance, including rental assistance, and including checks to people $2,400 per family.
Reclaiming my time.
And including
The
unemployment.
assistant majority-
All that I'm
benefits.
saying, this is a great debate. John, we should have this debate. And in 2 minutes, John, I'm going to give you the opportunity to say you support what we're doing, and then we will have this debate. That's your opportunity. But I want to get back. The senator from South Dakota did not answer the question that there was not apparently huge concern about socialism for the rich in the bill that they supported, or worried about the debt that would incur. So I see, if I may say so, a bit of hypocrisy here.
Use the H word.
Senator Thune and the Republican leadership wants to debate this issue. So do I. I think it's a great debate. Great debate. Now, as everybody knows, Senator McConnell proposed an idea. I don't agree with it, but it's an idea that's worthy of debate and discussion. And he said, let's combine 3 elements together.
Oh, God.
Let's
This shit
incorporate the bill passed in the House by 2/3 of the House, including 44 Republicans. Let's add to that the repeal of Section 230
which is horrible.
of the Telecommunications Act, and let's also add to that, at President Trump's request, an issue about voter integrity, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? That is what Senator McConnell proposed. And in one moment, I am going to bring, see, I know Republicans think I don't do much for them, that I'm not concerned about them, but Senator Thune, I'm going to bring your bill to the floor, show you what a nice guy I am. New year, I'm going to bring Mr. McConnell, Senator McConnell's bill right to the floor and give you an opportunity to vote for it. All that I am asking, while I bring Senator McConnell's Republican bill to the floor, we are going to bring the bill that passed the House with 44 Republicans to the floor as well. We'll have 2 votes. 1 vote on Senator McConnell's bill, needs 60 votes to pass. 1 bill on the House. 1 vote on the House bill, 60 votes to pass. That's it. So it's hard for me to imagine how Senator Thune will object to us bringing forward the Republican bill. Here it goes. This is the legalese that I need to say, and I'm going to bring it forth, and I'm sure that Senator Thune will support me in my effort. I ask unanimous consent that if cloture is invoked on the veto message on H.R. 6395, National Defense Authorization Act, that notwithstanding Rule 22, at 3 p.m. today, short period of time, 3 p.m. today, Friday, January 1st, the Senate proceed to the consideration of calendar number 645, H.R. 9051, to provide a $2,000 direct payment to the working class. That the bill be considered read a 3rd time and the Senate vote on passage of the bill. And that if passed, the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table. Further, that following the vote on H.R. 9051, the Senate proceed to consideration of calendar number 644, S5085, that the bill be considered read a 3rd time, that there be 1 hour of debate on the bill, equally divided and controlled by myself or my designee and Senator McConnell or his designee. That following the use or yielding back of that time, the Senate vote on passage of the bill, and that if passed, the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table, all without intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Oh, here we go.
The senator from Missouri.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, I want to say that I can't for the life of me figure out why it is so difficult to get a vote on the bills that Senator Sanders has just referenced when, by my count, the President of the United States, the Speaker of the House, a large majority of the House of Representatives, and I think a supermajority of this body are all in favor of $2,000 COVID relief payments to working Americans. Mm-hmm. Now, we've had some back and forth on the floor today about how we got to the level of $2,000. We all know how we got to that level. The President of the United States said that's the level he supported. Yep. The number originates with him. This is the number that he has asked for, and the House adopted it. And a majority of senators have said already publicly that they support it. And yet we can't seem to even get a vote on it. We can't even seem to have debate on it. I mean, with all due respect, this doesn't seem to me to be a Republicans versus Democrats issue. This seems to be the Senate versus the United States of America.
Ooh.
And I just don't understand it. And I'm willing to bet that the American people don't understand it either.
Oh, we don't.
I mean, here we are in the throes of the worst pandemic in a century that working people have borne the brunt of. And all that we're asking is that those working people be first in line for relief, and that they be given meaningful relief that is only approximately commensurate with the hardships that they and their families have borne. Now, I hear a lot of talk about how we can't afford it. I do notice, however, that we seem to be able to afford all kinds of other stuff. We can afford to send lots of money to other governments. We can afford to send all kinds of tax breaks and bailouts to big corporations. We can afford to spend enormous sums of money on pork, hundreds of billions of dollars in that last bill on pork, hundreds of billions. But we can't seem to find the money for relief for working people that the president and the House and the Senate all support, and yet we can't seem to get onto the floor. Let me just share 3 stories that I've heard just this week alone, from my home state, from Missouri. Danielle from St. Louis County, she called my office. She said her utilities are about to be shut off. She's desperate for help. She said a $2,000 payment would go a long way to help keep the lights on and her house warm. I heard from a mother in southeast Missouri, that's the boot heel of my state. She wrote that her son had lost pay because of his company cutting back hours because of COVID, and that he had himself contracted the virus, and so he'd had to be home, and he was missing work, missing shifts. His family can't make it paycheck to paycheck. His husband, her daughter-in-law, is donating plasma in order to help earn some extra grocery money. Donating plasma in order to get some money to pay for groceries to feed their family. Richard from St. Louis wrote to me that any extra help that he could get would go directly to paying his rent and his utilities. He had a job that he lost in the retail business, retail sector, and he's desperately struggling. I'll just say, Mr. President, these are not people who are ne'er-do-wells. These are working people. These are strong people. These are proud people. And all that they ask for, as I have said many times on this floor before, is a chance to get back up on their feet.
Yep.
And to be able to provide for their families. And I can't for the life of me understand why we cannot get so much as a vote on these bills. And so for that reason, Mr. President, I do not object. In fact, I enthusiastically support the measures that Senator Sanders is trying to bring to the floor, and I'd vote for them both if we were given the opportunity.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
The senator from Texas.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, I know Senator Toomey is delayed coming to the floor. On his behalf, I will object.
Objection is heard. Morning business is closed, and under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the veto message on H.R. 6395,
Oh, God.
which the clerk will report.
Veto message to accompany H.R. 6395, an act to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2021 for military activities of the Department of Defense and so forth and further purposes.
All right, so what's going on right here is Bernie done said his piece. Everybody done said their piece about what's going on. And now we're about to vote on the defense spending bill. How the Democrats need this to go is they need for it just not to pass. They need for it to go the way Donald Trump wants it to and just veto it because it's too bloated. if they get 60 votes, all the debate and grandstanding and XYZ that just happened doesn't count. So now we wait. And we see if this bill passes. And if it does, that's all it wrote. And to be completely honest, I don't see this bill not getting passed. I do not foresee Donald Trump's veto holding his ground. Because again, we's Americans and we support the militaries. Even though we spend, as a former military member, we spend an ungodly amount of money on random things. Excuse me. An ungodly amount of money on random things that aren't needed. On government contracts to contractors that are bloated.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Are we in a quorum call?
We got some.
We are not, sir.
All right. Mr. President, these will be the last few words Senator Reid and I will talk about before the vote. And I want to mention something that I haven't talked about as much as I probably should have. First of all, the cooperation working with Senator Reid and his staff. And this is a long, enduring thing. It's hard for people to believe, but we're actually starting on next year's bill now. We've already started. So it's going to be another long.
The Senate will be in order, please.
Since I thought I mentioned something that hasn't been talked about as much as it should have been talked about, that since we've suffered arguably the worst cyber attack in American history, this is the most significant piece of cyber legislation in American history. It contains 27 of our Cyber Solarium Commission recommendations. They're all 27 are in this NDA. To include provisions that are directly relevant to SolarWinds hack that would have allowed us to get ahead of this, most notably by allowing CISA, the Cybersecurity Division of DHS, to begin hunting for threats on .government networks. Now, we have other recommendations to enhance our cyber resilience for our nuclear command and control systems in this NDAA, establishing a national cyber director in the NDAA, strengthening CISIS, and elevating its leadership, giving it more resources. I fear that the SolarWinds attack is a harbinger of things to come. I'm very proud of the work our commission has done, and the provisions are absolutely critical. The final thing I'd say is that this is arguably the most serious piece of legislation when it comes to deterring China that we've had in decades, if not ever, including provisions such as the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. This is kind of a follow-up from the last year's European Deterrence Initiative. We're concentrating more on Russia, but this is Pacific. This is China. That's what the whole division of this bill is about, to enhance our presence and our deterrent posture in the Indo-PACOM provisions, protecting against Chinese industrial espionage, more transparency for Chinese military companies, reporting on Chinese United Front Work Department in the United States and abroad. The list goes on and on. It's a very serious piece of legislation when it comes to deterring China. And that's one of the things that we're concerned about. China is our #1 threat and will be for perhaps, regrettably, decades to come. So this bill brings us along where we should be. And once again, I want to say the effort that has gone into this bill, the weekends, the hard work, and Liz King and John Bonzo, I'd have to say to my good friend Jack Reed that they probably worked more weekends than they have not worked on weekends. So it's been a real effort. It's the most important, most significant piece of legislation that will pass, and this next vote's a very critical vote. And I would yield to Senator Reid for any comments that he would like to make about this. But I want to keep in mind that this is a real, people are talking about the Democrats and Republicans don't do things together. This has been an example of what can happen in government.
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Let me first begin by commending the chairman for his extraordinary effort. He led this process. Let there be no mistake about it. He rose to the challenges, and this has probably been the most challenging NDAA that I have witnessed in more than 20 years in the United States Senate because of many different effects. The pandemic, the need for social distancing in terms of hearings, the whole scope of challenges that have arisen in the past few months, and the chairman has done a remarkable job. Let me start by saying that this is essential for our national security. This bill is not optional. If we want to continue to maintain our security for the United States, we have to pass this legislation. It's that simple. What does it do? Well, it does things that we have to do every year. One, it provides for the support for our servicemen and women and their families. And I know we're all celebrating New Year's Day here. And, you know, it's kind of disconcerting to be working when everyone else is partying. But if you feel a little bit sort of like put upon, think about the soldiers in forward operating bases in Afghanistan that are facing danger. Think about the submariners and the ballistic submarines that have been at sea for months now, protecting the United States. Think about the airmen that flew the B-52 bombers to send a signal of deterrence to Iran. Think about them and their families, and you'll appreciate, I think, more of what they do every day and what we might do once in a while. One of the issues that the chairman spoke about was cybersecurity, absolutely essential. And as he said, we based our efforts on an extraordinarily insightful report by the Solarium Commission, headed by Angus King on our side, Congressman Mike Gallagher, and I want to make sure I say Mike Gallagher because I think I identified him with another Irish name last week, but it's Congressman Mike Gallagher. And I must give credit to Jim Langevin, my colleague from Rhode Island, who is one of the key cybersecurity experts in the House. Every day we are learning more about the extent of the Russian penetration of our whole national security apparatus and civilian companies. Yep. Just today, Microsoft announced that they had been deeply penetrated by the Russian incursion. And I suspect it's very serious. This legislation responds, in fact, it was done remarkably before we knew of it, but responds specifically to this type of attack on the United States. It gives agencies the authority to audit other agencies in terms of their cybersecurity, and it's just the first step. But if we don't take this step, we'll be further behind. Now, the other thing I want to point out, too, is echoing what the chairman said about the Pacific Defense Initiative. We've identified $2 billion that can be used, and we will focus upon how it's used to create a new strategy. This is really the first time that we have stepped back and said, let's set up a strategic posture that recognizes the true threats that China is now presenting to us in the Pacific. It's the first time we've done it. And what it does, it builds on our close relationships with key allies, Australia, Japan, South Korea. It does that by a series of steps. First, sort of command post exercises where we check our communications. Second, real exercises, getting to the point where large-scale joint exercises involving not only our key allies, but many other countries become possible. That will set us up for the ability to deter China when they see all of the nations of the Pacific that have worked with us closely, that are prepared to work with us. That will be a great deterrence, and that's the goal of this effort. So any suggestion that China is happy about this bill is completely baseless. And then finally, again, I must, like the chairman, thank the staff for their extraordinary work. John Bonsall, Liz King, all the staff members. But ultimately, again, my congratulations to the chairman for his great work. Of course, I urge passage. Again, I think this is essential. As I spoke before, there are thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen on the watch as we speak. it's our obligation to
Yes, the
them
defense
to give
bill
them the
is very
tools they
important.
need to protect
And
us.
we are getting
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
our
Thank you.
ever-loving
I yield
ass
the floor.
handed to us when it comes to cybersecurity, cyber defense, anything else. Like, there are literal teenagers in Russia
I'd go so
and
far
China
to suggest that,
into U.S.
Senator from
infrastructure.
Oklahoma.
that this is the most significant of the bills that we've passed every year for the last 59 years. And Mr. Chairman, I'd ask unanimous consent that the mandatory quorum call be waived with respect to the motion to invoke cloture on a veto message on H.R. 6395 NDAA.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
All right. Guess we voting. Guess we ain't filibustering. Guess we just gonna be voting. And away we go. All right, so guess we're back to voting. All right, so everybody, a lot of data, everybody's gonna be in here voting. To recap again, if this vote gets 60 votes, 60 yeses, it's a done deal. 2K is done for this session of Congress. This session of Congress, as Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, so the Democratic, portion of the Senate, said this is the last hurrah for this flavor of Congress. And either they're gonna get it done or they ain't. That's about it. So now we're just waiting. We're just waiting to see what comes down the pipeline. And I know they're frustrated for being here on New Year's, not with your family, but again, this is your job. This is your job that you ran for, campaigned for, put your family in a public eye for, to be a senator. There's only 100 y'all. So do your job. Heck, if you wanted more leverage either which way, you could bring Puerto Rico and make it a state. Hell, make the place you're currently sitting in a state. Make the District of Columbia, D.C., a state. That would give 4 more senators. No, yeah, 4 more senators to the flow. Still keeping it even. And everything would, you might get more Republicans, you might get more Democrats, but they don't want to give state led to report to Puerto Rico or D.C. Don't know why. Don't even know why. It's just a thing, but that's a completely different topic than what's going on right now. So let's
Motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the veto message on H.R. 6395, an act to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2021 for military activities of the Department of Defense and so forth and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators.
By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on the veto message on H.R. 6395, an act to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2021 for military activities of the Department of Defense, for military construction, and for defense activities of the Department of Energy, to prescribe military personnel strengths for such fiscal year, and for other purposes, shall be brought to a close. The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
All right, here we go. That's one yes. And they're going alphabetical order. The vote begins. I don't know why these people don't want to fund the American people. Give us back some of our own tax dollars.
Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn.
Don't know if you can hear that, but that was 5 yeses in a row.
Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt.
Kind of disappointed, Bernie. I definitely expected him to pull strong
Mr. Booker.
and just pull out the DC phone book and start reading that mug.
Mr. Bozeman.
Did not expect
Mr.
him
Braun.
to talk for 20 minutes, say some words,
Mr. Brown.
step out. Like, maybe he thought it was
Mr.
just
Burr.
fool's errand, but definitely thought we were gonna be sitting here like 3-4 hours at least. While he tries to filibuster to get some of this done, but it is what it is. Like, again, it probably was a fool's errand because people get real touchy when it comes to military spending. In my personal opinion, military spending and military pay, like for the soldiers, should be 2 separate bills. Like Bill A and Bill B. That way, the budget for the military spending, for government contractors, like projects, whatever you want to put in there, is different from are the soldiers getting paid? That's how it should be, but it's more or less, in my personal opinion, a way to make sure that whatever is in
Mr.
this
Burr.
massive conglomerate spending bill, that we
Ms.
spend
Cantwell.
what 10 to 15 times more than the next 10 countries
Mrs. Capito.
on military stuff.
Mr. Carden.
So
Mr. Carper.
it's just make sure everything that is in this massive bill
Mr.
always
Casey.
goes through, because if not,
Mr. Cassidy.
you take a deliberate hit of saying, "Hey, you're
Ms.
stopping the military
Collins.
from getting paid."
Mr. Coons.
And as a person who has a lot of family members in the military,
Mr. Cornyn.
they don't like
Ms.
that,
Cortez Masto.
and it doesn't look good
Mr.
in public,
Cotton.
even though it's vastly more complicated than that.
Mr. Kramer.
Oh,
Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Daines.
so I'm looking
Ms.
at
Duckworth.
so right now,
Mr. Durbin.
because PBS
Mr. Enzi.
counter,
Ms. Ernst.
but so. All right, let me see. Can I get a total?
Mrs. Feinstein.
Because
Mrs. Fisher.
this ain't looking good for us being
Mr. Gardner. Mrs. Gillibrand.
not at all.
Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Ms. Harris. Ms. Hassan.
Like, all right. Oh, yeah, this ain't looking good, fam. Currently 41-7.
Mr. Hawley.
People are saying
Mr.
yes.
Heinrich. Ms. Hirono.
7 people are saying no, and it's just going from there.
Mr. Hoven.
Again, once we cross that
Mrs.
second
Hyde
line,
Smith.
it's done,
Mr. Inhofe.
and that's what we don't want to see.
Mr. Johnson. Mr. Jones.
All right.
Mr. Kane.
All right.
Mr. Kelly.
Listen, all right. Since this seems
Mr. Kennedy.
a massive
Mr.
shit
King.
show. All right, what we gonna do coming up on the channel?
Ms. Klobuchar.
Let's try to post it. Let's try,
Mr. Langford.
I'm gonna be putting out videos.
Mr.
for
Leahy.
Abigail.
Mr. Lee.
Basically, if you have a side hustle,
Mrs. Leffler.
small business, anything, if you drive
Mr.
Uber
Manchin.
or Lyft, you should be able to apply
Mr. Markey.
for the ADL. And the thing when applying for grants,
Mr. McConnell.
the worst they can tell you is no.
Mr. Menendez.
Best case scenario, you get free money. And with the way
Mr. Merkley.
digging around with giving us money that we need to survive,
Mr. Moran.
if you got a side hustle and you
Ms.
already need a
Murkowski.
side hustle to make it, them giving you an extra $1,000 to extra 10 grand
Mr. Murphy,
for existing, for
Mrs.
having
Murray,
gumption to run a small,
Mr.
side hustle
Paul,
or a small business, take it.
Mr.
If you ain't gonna take
Purdue,
it, some other big conglomerate's gonna suck it up.
Mr.
Kind of
Peters,
like with Tom Brady's company. That mother
Mr.
lover
Portman,
bought a yacht from his PPP loans. A whole yacht.
Mr. Reed,
All right,
Mr.
so
Risch,
bad news.
Mr. Roberts,
We are at 57 yays
Mr. Romney,
and 9
Ms.
noes.
Rosen, Mr. Rounds,
Once we get over
Mr.
60,
Rubio,
I'm just gonna close it down.
Mr. Sanders,
Because after that,
Mr. Seth,
it's nothing to debate.
Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schumer,
Just gonna be done.
Mr. Scott of Florida,
After the EIDL,
Mr. Scott
we're
of
gonna
South
do the
Carolina,
rental assistance video.
Mrs. Shaheen,
So for y'all know where to go, who to bother, XYZ.
Mr.
So if you're
Shelby,
behind on rent or
Ms.
XYZ.
Cinema,
If you're behind on rent or anything
Ms.
else
Smith,
of the like, you
Ms.
should
Stabenow,
qualify for this rental assistance. And the rental assistance is going
Mr.
to be
Sullivan,
broken down by state, county,
Mr. Tester,
and to your certain offices.
Mr.
So
Thune,
this money is going to be
Mr.
real finite,
Tillis,
and it's going to get gone real fast. So if you need it, you need to apply.
Mr.
Currently, the
Toomey,
portals aren't open.
Mr.
So I'm
Udall,
going to tell you everything you're going to need to do.
Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner,
So EIDL, rental
Ms.
assistance.
Warren,
If you,
Mr. Whitehouse,
but if you are on
Mr.
unemployment,
Wicker,
the new round of funding has already started, and
Mr.
you need to
Wyden,
apply yesterday. So
Mr. Young,
quick, fast, in a hurry, hop on that because that money's not finite. But the faster you get your paperwork in, the faster you start getting paid again. And again, with the way they're dicking around with this, all right now, and we have hit critical mass, 61-9. So Trump's veto has been overridden. The National Defense Bill is going through, and this is basically the Senate's signal to us of you ain't getting no more money. Sucks to suck. Biden might be able to help you, but for us, we dipping out, we going home. All right, so I'm gonna go grab me a bottle
Senators
of wine
voting in the affirmative.
because our
Alexander,
government
Baldwin,
is shit.
Blunt, Burr, Cantwell, Collins, Cornyn, Duckworth,
I'm PTRO.
Ernst,
Please like and subscribe.
Feinstein,
If
Fisher,
information is useful,
Grassley,
wash your
Hassan,
hands,
Heinrich,
wear a mask, beads. Love
Inhofe,
you.
Kelly, Leahy, Peter.